Parshas Yisro. To see this shir in writing, please refer to our website, yeshivakesetorah.org, or Facebook, where it is written out. The Pasuk says, the Psukim relate, the title of this shir is, we must constantly remind ourselves of our duties on earth. The Psukim relate that prior to the giving of the Holy Torah, Hashem spoke to Moshe to warn Klal Yisrael to set a boundary around Har Sinai. Anyone who would climb the mountain or even touch it would die. 3 days later, on the designated day of the giving of the Torah, there was thunder and lightning and a heavy cloud on the mountain, on Har Sinai. An intensely loud and piercing shofar blast was heard. The entire mountain was in smoke and trembled violently. The great moment had arrived. The Almighty Himself, in all His glory, descended upon the peak of Mount Sinai. At this holy moment, a strange dialogue took place between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem said to Moshe, "Go back down and warn the people not to cross the boundary." Moshe Rabbeinu's response to Hashem was that it was unnecessary to go back down and warn them again, since they had already been warned 3 days earlier not to touch the mountain. Since they had no permission, they definitely would not climb the mountain or touch it. Hashem's response to Moshe was, "Go back down and warn the people a second time, for one should warn a person both prior to the deed and again at the time of the deed." This is the way Rashi understands the dialogue. Thus, according to Rashi, although Moshe Rabbeinu deemed it unnecessary to descend the mountain to warn the people a second time not to climb the mountain or touch it, Hashem felt otherwise. It is imperative to go back down and warn the people a second time. For although they were already warned 3 days earlier not to touch the mountain, now, at the actual time of the giving of the Torah, they must be warned a second time. This is very difficult to understand. Moshe Rabbeinu's logic seems to be more compelling than that of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why should it be necessary to go back down and warn the people once again not to touch the mountain? For who were these people? This was the Der Deya, the most knowledgeable generation that ever lived. This was the generation that was worthy to see the divine revelations at Yetzias Mitzrayim, at the splitting of the sea, and even now at Har Sinai. This was a generation of Gedolim and Tzaddikim. Do people of such greatness need to be continually reminded of something that had just been told to them 3 days earlier. Moreover, who warned them 3 days earlier not to touch the mountain? It was Moshe Rabbeinu, who did so in the name of the Almighty Himself. Wouldn't a warning by the man of God in the name of Hashem be sufficiently awe-inspiring to impress upon them not to climb or touch the mountain? Was it necessary to remind them once again, since the initial warning came from such an eminent and spiritually overwhelming source? Furthermore, Moshe Rabbeinu himself testified that the people heard and fully understood the first warning 3 days earlier not to climb or even touch the mountain. They had understood it so clearly that Moshe Rabbeinu exclaimed, "The people cannot climb Mount Sinai," as if to say that it would be impossible for them to climb Mount Sinai, since they clearly understood this to be utterly forbidden. If Moshe Rabbeinu himself testified that they did indeed understand this, why did Hashem insist that Moshe go back down and warn the people a second time? Wasn't it entirely unnecessary? We thus have 3 logical reasons proving Moshe Rabbeinu's reasoning to be correct. If this is so, doesn't Moshe Rabbeinu's logic seem to be more compelling than that of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The answer is a resounding no. Hashem declared to Moshe Rabbeinu, "I created man. I know his weaknesses and deficiencies. I know that although the Der Deya is a generation of Gedolim and Tzaddikim, and furthermore you, Moshe, warned them in my holy name, and that you yourself testified that they clearly understood the first warning 3 days earlier not to touch the mountain, they nevertheless must be warned a second time. For such is the human nature of man. Unless he is constantly reminded prior to the deed and at the time of the deed, the keenest and most obvious perceptions tend to wear off. May we ever be conscious of our human weaknesses and deficiencies. Unless a person constantly stirs and awakens himself, the most simple and obvious truths will wear off. If this can happen to even a Der Deya who were warned by Moshe Rabbeinu in the name of Hashem and who understood Moshe Rabbeinu's confirmed testimony that they clearly understood him, then certainly this applies to us. We who are not on the level of the Der Deya must constantly remind themselves, Ma chayvosai b'yolamai, what is our duty on earth? What does Hashem expect of us? How should we conduct our lives? Hashem created us for the express purpose of having our lives revolve around Torah learning, of Torah, learning it and observing it. We were created to develop our character traits, goodness, kindness, and generosity. We were created to be sincere, holy, and pure. We must constantly remind ourselves of these obligations. Therefore, how incumbent it is for each and every one of us to study Musar daily and to become proficient in the Sforim HaKadoshim, particularly in the classical Sifrei Musa that open our eyes to these very lofty concepts. The Chayves Halvaves, Mesilas Yeshorim, Orchos Tzadikim, and the Sharei Tshuva, the Rabbeinu Yonah. May we be Zoche to constantly awaken ourselves to Ma Chayvosai B'Elamai, and thereby live a life of holiness and purity. Amen v'Amen.